When most people think of Hawaii, they think of just 8 islands: Hawaii Island, Maui, Molokai, Kaho'olawe, Lanai, Oahu, Kauai, and Ni'ihau. Some people might also be able to name the nearby uninhabited islands like Mokoli'i or Mokuauia, but Hawaii goes much further than that. Northwest of Kauai and Ni'ihau lies Papahānaumokuākea, 583,000 square miles of ocean, including the islands and atolls of the northwestern Hawaiian Islands.
Extends 1,200 miles past Kauai. It's 14 land masses with many smaller reefs and shoals there.
Papahānaumokuākea is a sacred space that can give us a glimpse into what used to be and what still could be. Kanaka Oiwi, Native Hawaiians traveled to and from Papahānaumokuākea to practice voyaging, celestial observations, and conduct ceremonies at the many heiau on both Nihoa and Mokumanamana. It's home to complex ecosystems that extend from the land into the deep ocean. It's a sacred area infused with mana, a deep spiritual energy. Today, the environmental and spiritual significance of Papahānaumokuākea is a rarity in Hawaii and the world. In this 6-episode series, we'll explore the depths of Papahānaumokuākea. We'll learn about its relationship to Native Hawaiians, talk to some of its current stewards, and uncover just a fraction of what Papahānaumokuākea can tell us about how we should care for the rest of Hawaii and the world at large. Finally, we'll ask the question, how can we protect it before it's too late? My name is Kaleo Pa'avaris, and this is Hanohano Nā ʻāina Kūpuna, exploring Papahānaumokuākea. For Native Hawaiians, name is everything. In a presentation on continuing the Hawaiian naming practices within Papahānaumokuākea, Pelika Andrade shared the importance of names.
Names carry so much meaning in history, from remembering an impactful moment in time, honoring a loved one, marking a funny, scary, or momentous event, describing behaviors, characteristics, and appearances, connecting into genealogy, expressing hopes of the future or dreams of the past. Names have so many layers, meanings, and representations, but what they all have in common is a relationship or reflection of a relationship embedded in them.
He inoa no Papahānaumokuākea. For decades, Papahānaumokuākea was called the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands, and each of its islands and atolls had names from European or Western explorers like Midway Atoll. These names are just as important because they are a reflection of Papahānaumokuākea's more recent history. In 1903, Executive Order No. 199A placed Midway Atoll under the control of the United States Navy. Management of the northwestern Hawaiian Islands later shifted to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as attention on the islands changed from a tactical military location to an ecosystem worthy of conservation and protection. Today, Papahānaumokuākea is cared for by multiple international, federal, state, and local governing bodies, all with the involvement of Native Hawaiians. A critical part of the shift in the management and stewardship of the place has been normalizing referring to these islands by their Hawaiian names instead of their English names. Native Hawaiians have been able to strengthen our pilina, or our relationship, to Papahānaumokuākea by researching, re-remembering, and perpetuating the names given by Native Hawaiians hundreds of years ago. Papahānaumokuākea was not the original name of the place. Our ali'i may have called it by a different name that we may not know of. Instead, the name Papahānaumokuākea was bestowed in 2007 after months of work by the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands Native Hawaiian Cultural Working Group.
Aloha, I'm Pualani Kanahele, and I'm from Hilo, Hawaii, born and raised here. I'm pure Hawaiian, and it is my passion to be Hawaiian and to know things Hawaiian.
Dr. Pualani Kanaka Kanahele is a renowned kumuhula, scholar, and cultural practitioner. She has represented Hawaii on a worldwide stage and has been one of the strongest advocates for Native Hawaiians. She has a vast reservoir of knowledge, both traditional and contemporary.
we really don't know the reason why they named it Hawaii. We don't even know what it means. But I sort of think that what it means, because if you just say Hawaii, Hawaii is like when you ever have a hot spot and you pour water on it and the big steam comes up. That's Hawaii. And I think whoever named this island named it because of the big steam that was coming up. The big steam gave the island life. And like in the first line of the Komolipo, that hot island, and the island of Hawaii is, and the island of the steam giving it life. And so you know that another island is being born, and then another island is being born, but it all begins with those islands up there. And yeah, that's an older sibling.
Alongside Uncle Buzzy Agard, Aunty Pua brought Papahānaumokuākea to the Native Hawaiian Cultural Working Group as a potential name for the northwestern Hawaiian Islands.
Papahānaumokuākea to me is like an older sibling. And it's like an older sibling because I live on the youngest island. And so I have a great deal of respect for older siblings because they work hard at what they do.
The first time Aunty Pua went to Papahānaumokuākea was to the islands of Nihoa and Mokumanamana, the first two islands past Kauai.
It's always a curious thing to me because, well, initially, the Manamana doesn't appear anywhere in our history, by the way, at all. And no one talks about it. But the islands appear in the Pele and Hiniaka chants. The Mokumanamana is my interest, is of the Manamana.
Mokumanamana are the first islands in Papahānaumokuākea. Its name reflects its appearance. Moku meaning island and manamana meaning finger or toe, like the jagged rocks that jut out of the island's base.
The first time I went up there, we went for a burial actually at Nihoa. And then we went over to Mokumanamana the next day. Early in the morning, some of the people went up onto the island, and I was still on the boat on the south side of the island, and the sun rose on the north side of the island, and it was the summer solstice, and it rose over one of the manamanas, and all of a sudden, oh my goodness, I know what the manamanas are for. Well, I have an idea of what the manamanas are for. I don't know what it's for.
Aunty Pua is prolific throughout the Native Hawaiian community, but she was surprised when she was asked to name the place.
I was kind of set back when they asked, you know, what I would name, what kind of name I would think about for that place. And I was, because I wasn't ma'a to that place. You know, that's not where I went. And I think the first time I went up there was 2007 or something like that. And so when they asked, it was prior to that. And I had to think about it for a long time. And then I had to look at a lot of pictures. I had to read through some people's idea of what it was and all of that. But basically, for me, the basic naming for that place had to do with what its function was. And I think that's why, and that to me, that's why Hawaii has that name. What the function of that place was, and land has a heavy kuleana for us because we live on these small islands, and so we cannot, and everything else that lives, that goes through life, have to have land to live on. I mean, even the fish have to have land. The land is made, the coral is made after on parts of that land, and then everything comes around the coral, and the fish has place to live and eat and breathe and all of that. I mean, they swim in the ocean, but they still have to have land. And so land becomes a very important commodity for life, and life as we know it. And if you don't have it, you don't have life. And so the idea of Papahānaumoku for me was that it is ongoing and it is cycle and it's everlasting. It's regenerative. And we have to have a name that was the cause of regeneration. And Papahānaumokuākea was that cause. I thought about the name for a long time. I thought about a lot of things, and I was honored to be asked to provide a name. And then I was honored when they said, okay, they're going to use this name. Wow. Yeah.
The name Papahānaumokuākea commemorates the union of two Hawaiian ancestors, Papahānaumoku and Wakea, who gave rise to the Hawaiian archipelago, the taro plant, and the Hawaiian people.
The name Papahānaumokuākea comes from an old story from mythologies concerning Hawaiian traditions and cosmology. And in the distant past, there were two very well-known ancestors of the native Hawaiians, Papahānaumoku, who was symbolic of the Earth Mother, or Papa, who literally gives birth to the islands, and Wakea, who was like the Sky Father. And the union of these two people resulted in two things: the birthing of the Hawaiian race and all the descendants that live in Hawaii today, and also the birthing of the Hawaiian Islands, the most isolated archipelago on the planet, that stretches all the way from Hawaii Island all the way up to Kure or Holaniku.
The name really comes from the Kumulipo. And the Kumulipo in chapter 13, which is a female chapter. And when I say it's a female chapter, I'm saying it's female because throughout the Kumulipo is like a genealogy. And it's a genealogy of many regenerative creatures and many things. And so not only Kanaka, in fact, Kanaka comes in way later. But usually the genealogy begins with the male, and then it talks about the female. And then the child, the offspring, then male, female. This particular oki or va in the Kumulipo begins with the female. And so the female is first, and then she mates with the male, and then the offspring and the female mates with the male and offspring. And so it's a different movement. And so you know that particular va is female oriented. And the female oriented va talks about three foundations of cycles. And the three foundations of cycle is Papa Huli Honua, Papa Huli Lani, and Papahānaumoku. I named that place Papahānaumoku because in my mind, when they ask for a name, the idea of Hanaumoku is that things are being created or things are being born constantly. The constancy of birth is evident. And you know, when we talk about the islands that, you know, we live on islands, and our islands come out of the ocean, and eventually they go back into the ocean. And so you have that idea of Hanau and then Hala, Hanau and Hala, and that cycle, and that's what the Kumulipo is all about. It's about that cycle of Hanau and Hala. And our island is Hanau and Hala. And when you talk about a moku, we usually think about an island. And because the moku sort of is separated from something when it's born. But moku can be anything. It can be a human that's, you know, separated from the mother when it's born. He becomes a moku. Yeah. But so that's the idea of the moku. And so the idea of the moku is birth. And when I think about that particular end of the island that is going through an hala kind of position, where it's all kind of sandy and the big mountains are gone and the big rocks are gone. But maybe it's always been like that, I don't know. But the idea of it being gone doesn't mean that life doesn't exist there. Life continues to exist there.
Hawaiian place names are chosen carefully and can reflect its landscape, weather, or history. For example, the original name of Lahaina was Malu'ulu-o-Lele, or the shaded breadfruit grove of Lele, to reflect the ulu or breadfruit trees that flourished in the area. Papahānaumokuākea's name reflects the vast expanse and spiritual importance of the place to Native Hawaiians. But it's not just Papahānaumokuākea. All of the birds, the plants, and the islands carry meaning with them too. Brad Ka'alaleo Wong, part of the cultural working group, tells us a little bit about the island of Nihoa.
I've been to Nihoa, let's say about maybe five times. Been to Nihoa. That's the first island in Papahānaumokuākea as you're traveling up. And Nihoa can be described as even like the name itself comes from like niho, like your tooth. And that's kind of what the island is like when you're approaching it. It's a tooth. It's like a baby's tooth kind of emerging out of the water. Just this really kind of jagged outcrop of something kind of coming out. And when you're 30 miles or so away from the island, you can just kind of see, it just kind of looks like this weird pointy jagged thing just kind of popping out of the ocean. And for those that have been able to voyage to sail on a voyaging canoe there, or to even just be on a research vessel there, I think it's so like beneficial to our understanding of our traditions in Mo'olelo, to kind of see that island appear as the way our Kūpuna did.
Names are so important that the Papahānaumokuākea Cultural Working Group has an entire nomenclature hui dedicated to the naming process.
Aloha nui kākou, wau ke ia Hauʻoli Lorenzo-Elarco, hanai ia wau e ka ua ki puʻupuʻu ma ka ʻāina mauna o Waimea. So my name is Hauʻoli Lorenzo-Elarco. I'm from Waimea, Hawaii Island.
Hauʻoli is an educator, student, and scholar who writes about Hawaiian language revitalization and marine and environmental conservation through indigenous ecological knowledge.
Really, when I tell my story of how I got involved, I kind of just came out of the blue, pun intended there, right? Where I just started. I went to a webinar once about Papahānaumokuākea and the nomenclature hui, and I was just amazed by the kind of work that has been done and the kind of work that is being planned. And I just thought, I want to help. I want to support in any way that I can. There was just something that I felt drawn to. So that's my first and foremost my pilina as a Kanaka and as a supporter. I jumped in the cultural working group just wanting to learn, right? I wanted to learn, and I said, anything that you guys want me to do, I can help. If you want me to do the paperwork kind of stuff, I can. I'm good at those kinds of things. So I said I will help with anything that I can. So when you continue to show up, the more kuleana you get. I think again that's part of that idea of what being a Kanaka is. And then one of the kuleanas that I was asked to sort of step into was the Hui Mana Mana.
Hui Mana Mana is the leadership team in the cultural working group. It's a collection of different people who all have kuleana. Whether it is genealogical work or something else, everyone in Hui Mana Mana has a responsibility to Papahānaumokuākea.
The Hui Mana Mana helps to direct that collective voice to the different partners, to the different organizations, to the different places, spaces, the people that need to hear these kinds of stories.
Hauʻoli is the chair of the Nomenclature Hui, a subcommittee within the cultural working group that helps give names to the plants, animals, and islands of Papahānaumokuākea.
The Nomenclature Hui was charged with looking at the historical names of places, including the island names, species names, and also looking at spaces that are to be named as well. And so this idea here was again to almost sort of create an inventory or an understanding of what our relationship is to this space as seen through names and a language, right? So as we know, especially in our context as Kanaka and Olala Hawaii speakers, We know that a name isn't just a name. A name tells you history. It tells you about a relationship. It tells you about, you know, a particular time that is important to gather or to fish, right? There's so much information embedded within a name. And so the nomenclature hui, our kuleana, was to capture that, was to understand that and help articulate that to the broader audience. We create and we maintain relationships between people and place. And so through the art and act of naming, relationships are created.
Naming is a heavy responsibility. In bestowing a name, Hauʻoli reflects a connection between us and the world we live in.
My pilina to Papahānaumokuākea, I think first and foremost, is as a Kanaka, as a native Hawaiian. I'm recognizing that I'm from this land. When I mean from this land, I mean from Hawaii, Mokupuni, all the way to Holaniku. You know, these are my ancestral lands. So I think my pilina first and foremost is that of a Kanaka. All of these different things are in our genealogy, right? Just as we were talking about how we are connected to the islands, we're also connected to everything that's in it, right? And we call that the Hawaiian universe. And so we know that we're related to these things because the Kumulipo has told us that we come from the Ko'a, that we descend from the Mo'o, the Manu, and so on and so forth. And so we recognize that there's a relationship there. And again, our names help us to articulate that relationship through our language. So when I think about names and naming, I always think about one of my former kumu and something that she said to me once. She said it in a presentation before, but one of the values of place names is that, again, you know, place names, they encode relationships, they encode knowledge about a place, a space, and about a time, about a people. And when we use place names, not only are we recalling all that knowledge, we're also quoting our ancestors. So in saying these place names, we're repeating them. And we're repeating those histories, we're repeating those relationships, and we're continuing to build upon them. And so I think that name, Papahānaumokuākea, is a reminder of that. You know, Papahānaumokuākea isn't necessarily a traditional or an old name. It's a melting between two perspectives, two ideas that is distinctly Kanaka, Papahānaumoku and Wakea, right? And so articulating that into those ideas of cosmology, about history, about those relationships that formed between Papa and Wakea, right? So I think about then all of the creatures and the newly discovered things that we are continuing to find nowadays, particularly in Papahānaumokuākea. And so I think about our keiki, right? Our keiki, particularly in our Hawaiian language schools. How will they connect to those newly discovered limu? How will they connect to those birds that are on Nihoa? How will they connect to those rare grasses that are at Holaniku, or are the fish that are at the bottom of the ocean? How will they connect with those things if they do not have a Hawaiian name? You know? And so in a sense, you know, I like the way that Hokupihana kind of says it as well. She says that names is sort of like remembering that these guys are a part of our family. It's bringing them back into our genealogy and recognizing that, hey, you're one of us and we see you. And so it's in that, right, that we remember that these are a part of us, right? And even with that said, giving new names to newly discovered species is also a way, is also proof to me that that we are a living people, a living culture, and we have a living language. So the ability for us to give these names is just representative of us as a living people, as a living lahui.
He Inoa no Papahānaumokuākea, an important name for an important place. There's nowhere in the world like it. Aulani Wilhelm, the former NOAA superintendent for Papahānaumokuākea, shares why it's an important cultural place for Native Hawaiians in a story from Olelo TV.
Kind of in our predominant creation story, we know we come from the coral polyp. And so we believe that our ancestors descend from there, that our first human ancestor was the coral. So this place is where we come from, and after we pass this life, where we return.
Just like the Kumulipo, the origin story for Native Hawaiians, the name Papahānaumokuākea serves as a representation of our kuleana, our responsibility to the world around us. It's more than just a place. It's our Kūpuna, our ancestor, traditionally referred to as ʻāina akua, to be treated with respect and care.
The story serves as a reminder to everybody about the connection between man and his environment and our responsibility to take care of the environment.
The resiliency of Papahānaumokuākea is a wonder, but is that alone enough to protect our ʻāina kupuna? Over the remainder of the series, we'll explore the breadth of our pilina and kuleana to Papahānaumokuākea, from scientific research and the next generations of stewards to the ins and outs of protections. Here's a glimpse of what you can expect.
I felt like I was in the Kumulipo. You're seeing all these things that are enumerated in the genealogical chain of life being born on Earth, and you can't help but reconnect on a much deeper spiritual level.
Next episode, we talk about the voyaging and cultural activities of Native Hawaiians from hundreds of years ago.